How's it going, everyone? Mike the Warhost here, and today we're continuing our Showdown at Retribution video series by taking an in-depth look at Gustave Eiffel's spider in the web detachment, what you can do with it on the tabletop, and how to go from the starter set force to a tournament-ready list. As a reference, the unit information referenced here will be based off of version 3.04 alpha of the Enlightened stat cards. Spider in the Web is a fast-moving horde list centered around Gustave Eiffel's skittering creations running up the board. It's much less restrictive than something like Irresistible Force, but still excels when utilizing the speedier units available to the Enlightened. For this particular video series, I'll be doing all model and points counts with the idea of splitting the box contents evenly between two players. If you're picking up the Showdown at Retribution set for yourself though, you can adjust the bike model counts as you see fit. The contents of the Enlightened half of the starter set will give you 8 models totaling 72 points and 3 fortune, which will leave you plenty of points to either fill out the rest of the points with compatible Enlightened models to bring along a second detachment. In the starter set, you get the following models: Gustave Eiffel, Emily Norge, Smash and Grab, 2 Construct Cavalry, and 3 Cavalry units. The 3 Cavalry units can be built as either Strider Cav or Monocap, depending on taste. For this video, we'll be going with 2 Strider Cav and a single Monocap. Gustave Eiffel is your detachment commander, and he's a bit more fragile than Tesla. Gustav comes with Agile to let him automatically pass quick checks for jumping and climbing, as well as re-rolling grit checks from falling. Chain of Command lets him refresh his fortune at the end of the activation if he's within 12 inches of another unit in his detachment, and Elusive makes backstab attacks against him really difficult to pull off. Skitter lets him ignore the rules for turning templates, as well as giving a small bonus to determining obscured modifiers when someone takes a shot. Trailfinder gives a nearby troops unit the opportunity to get a free run action at the start of the game. An important note is that Gustav does not have Quicken the Dead, so he'll need some extra care when positioning. The important rule with Gustav, however, is Carpathogen. This special action lets him bring construct models back from the dead, so long as the models don't have the mounted trait or the entire unit is destroyed. This rule right here is the Enlightened's bread and butter. This is what keeps the waves of robotic zombies shuffling along towards the enemy. Learning how to utilize this to maximum effect is key to winning with the Enlightened. Gustav comes with an Atomic Blunderbuss that's good at hitting a good number of models thanks to the Torn trait, as well as lighting them on fire with Hazardous. A piercing of -2 and brutal on a crit makes him dangerous to models clustered together. His Servo Claws are a good way to soften up tougher opponents thanks to Tangle, and Refined gives you a greater chance to bump the piercing all the way up to a hefty -3 on a crit. While Gustav isn't as tough as Tesla, he's just as dangerous. Emily Norge is primarily a support unit meant to help the Enlightened's mechanical wonders stay in the fight longer. Jury Rig Automata lets her bring a destroyed Automata unit back to the game after passing a mind check. She can't bring back more models to unit than it started with though, and the raised Automata units come back stunned if the mind check has failed. An important note is that unlike Carpathogen, Jury Rig Automata can be used even if the entire unit is destroyed. Override Automata allows Emily to compel a nearby Automata unit to give it a free move or combat action outside of its regular activation, provided she passes a mind check. Since it's a free action, it can't be focused or use any fortune for rerolls. Override Automata works for both friendly and enemy Automata units, so be sure to pay close attention to the placement of all nearby Automata. Repair gives any nearby machine or construct unit the ability to reroll grit checks, provided the attacker doesn't have either the shock or shred qualities, making your units harder to take down without dedicated fire. Emily has no ranged weapons, so she'll need to stay close to another unit to stay alive. She has the same Servo Claw that Gustav does, so getting into melee with her can be dangerous. Overall though, Emily needs to stay in the rear with the gear to maximize her capabilities. An important note is that Emily is also the only unit in the starter set that is not tainted. While this doesn't come into play in starter set games, it can be a factor in regular games. Smash and Grab, however, loves to get stuck in. Berserker means Smash and Grab will need to pass a mind check at the start of his activation to act normally. If he fails, he will immediately move towards the closest enemy unit within line of sight, taking the shortest route possible. While not a big deal in early games, this can cause problems if that shortest route possible puts him within range of a booby trap, for example. Durable lets him shrug off most incoming fire by reducing its piercing by 1, and Dying Breath lets him get a single combat action in before he is removed from the board when wounded. Forceful Strike lets him add a -2 to the piercing for a single attack, and Hardy lets him reroll failed grit checks if the attack doesn't have the blast or torrent qualities. Monstrous forces enemy units to reroll past morale checks even if he's within 5 inches. And Split Personality forces you to discard the current action card when activating him and draw a new one. This can be a great way to ditch low action point cards without wasting an activation on someone else. He has 2 melee weapons to choose from. His Crushing Claw comes with a piercing of -2 and lethal on a crit, and his Mighty Hammer comes with stun and refine as well as brutal on a crit. Oddly enough, he also has the ram keyword, letting you run him into other models to either force them away from him or take a grit check. A great way to push an opponent off an objective at the end of the round, or push an enemy unit outside of command range if needed. The Construct Cavalry is your usual fast-moving flanking unit designed to send hate and discontent downrange as quickly as possible. They have bulky, so they can't hunker down. Durable lets them ignore the first point of piercing unless it comes from a weapon with the brutal blast or torrent qualities. Lobotomized gives them the chance to reroll failed morale checks. If the unit has just a single model, however, a failed morale check means it's gone. Surefoot lets them ignore any uneven ground penalties, as well as rerolling any needed grit checks. Failsafe Detonator turns the cavalry into suicide bombers, removing them from the table and giving any model in base contact an automatic piercing -2 hit. The cavalry comes with a set of Gatling guns with special and brutal, but not linked. The ROA of 4, however, makes this a bit less of an issue though. The Strider Cav is an interesting harasser unit that's best used as a way to soften up enemy units for others to deal with. Agile makes quick checks a breeze, Durable lets them weather most enemy fire a bit easier, Elusive makes backstab actions much more difficult, Failsafe Detonators gives you a dramatic option for dealing with blobs of infantry, Monstrous Forces re-rolls on successful morale tests. Skirmishers boost their coherency range to 4 inches, and Skinner removes the use of the turning template as well as providing a small boost to dealing with obscured modifiers during enemy shooting. They come with 2 weapons for either ranged or melee fighting, a set of industrial drills that come with an ROA of 2 and lethal on a crit, and a web launcher that has Tangle and Torrent as well as lethal on a crit. The web launcher is where the money is for the Strider Calves, as it can put both stunned and disordered on a unit if they fail a fight check alongside their grit check. Remember, if a unit is already stunned or disordered and gets another condition, the attack immediately becomes lethal, forcing a reroll on successful grit checks. The Monocap is a slower and bulkier version of the Construct Cavalry with some extra tricks. Deadly Ram boosts the piercing of its ram attacks to -2, and Rapid increases the focus bonus for movement up to 3 inches instead of the regular 2. Bulky, durable, failsafe detonators, and skirmishers we've already covered. The Heavy Man Reapers it's armed with, though, are no joke. They come with brutal on a hit as well as lethal on a crit and an ROA of 2, giving you the potential to cause 3 hits per model. A single Monocap can cause enough damage to force a morale test on just about anyone. Its aim value isn't the best, so it might be advantageous to spend that extra action point to focus it when possible. Now that we know what you're getting, how do we build an effective tournament list? Your first decision should be how many points you want to devote to bulking out the spider in the web detachment before looking at a second detachment. You can easily max out the current slots for Construct Cavalry, Strider Cav, and Monocav units and still have enough points for 2 full units of Widowers and an additional 4-man Widower unit to get to the 150 point limit. If you go that route, however, not only will you have Gustav's Paltry 3 fortune to use for that entire detachment, you'll also only have a single source of Carpathogen available for everyone. And since so much of the Enlightened revolves around the use of Carpathogen to resurrect fallen models, you'll really be hamstringing yourself with just a single source. That same thing applies to Jury Rig Automaton. Emily will be your one source, and she doesn't move fast enough to keep up with anyone aside from Smash and Grab. My recommendation would be to start with a rough goal of about 100 points for Spider in the Web and leave the remaining for a secondary posse that will complement this one well. If you add an additional Construct Cavalry model and max out the unit sizes for the Strider Cav and Monocav units, that will get you to 97 points, which is pretty darn close to the 100 point goal. Should you want to take advantage of the detachment's bonus to Strider Cav and Widower's free charge focus, you can swap out the Monocavs for another Strider Cav unit. I wouldn't recommend using Widower solely to take advantage of the Posse bonus, as they only have a basic melee weapon available to them. If I were building this list, I would add a small meat grinder detachment to act as objective holders with Kyle the Black and Francis Tumblety, providing Carpathogen to babysit them while the spider in the web moves forward to engage the opponent. So what's the best way to actually use your list in the game? Combined fire is what will win you the day here. Use the Strider Cav units to tangle the more dangerous enemy units and try to get both conditions on them. Then follow up with harder hitting units like the Monocavs, Smash and Grab, or the Contour Cavalry. If Emily is near any one of these units, don't forget to utilize Jury Ring Automata to get some extra shots out of them. Gustav's Atomic Blunderbuss can also be used to help finish off units, but pay extra attention to keep him and his Carpathogen ability safe. As mentioned before, use the Meat Grinder detachment to simply babysit objectives, with Kyle and Francis providing Carpathogen support. Feel free to put a unit of Construct Henchmen with Francis so he can take advantage of his Dark Council rule to pump out additional rifle volleys, even if they're going to be done with an aim value of 3. Quantity has a quality all its own, after all. Well, that's going to do it for me today. Stay tuned for more Wild West Exodus, Mythos, Fog and Friction, and Dystopian Wars content in the near future, as well as some looks at Lost World Exodus in the not so near future. Maybe. At some point. Please? Alright, take care everyone.